Okay, we should be good. Hello, good evening. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm here with the duck. Our guests are pending, so to speak. But yeah, hope everyone's had a good week and we've got some stuff to talk about. How are you doing, man?
Good, good. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. I'm feeling slightly scammed. It's got nothing to do with the market for a change. My dad bought these like dark chocolate corn thins, which are basically like what happens when rice cakes go on a diet, right? So they're like really thin rice cakes, basically.
Yep.
And he had this like multi-pack, and within each pack there are three, right? So I'm like, okay, that's cool. I go to the supermarket, they're out of the um, chocolate ones, and they have normal ones. I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. I'm not like huge on that anyway. So I bring them back, and it's the same pack, same packaging, everything, same price. But in the normal ones, in every single pack, there's two, not three. And I'm like, no wonder there's like an obesity epidemic, right? When you buy the chocolate ones, you get more for the same price and same whatever, and you buy the normal ones and you get shortchanged by one rice cake per pack, which is pretty
That
fucking
is a scam,
outrageous.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean the market's down 10% and I'm overpaying for snacks. Just it's
Uh,
really over.
Double whammy, yeah.
Yeah, so
There
that's me.
goes there goes the allowance for the week, huh?
It's legit over. Yeah, I have to find something else to do, I guess.
Oh shit.
Yeah, okay, let's get going. First of all, of course, thank you to Bybit for sponsoring the show and supporting the stream. Their links can be found in the description below if you want to support us, the channel, Technical Roundup, all that good stuff. As you'll know, they help us with the newsletter as well as the YouTube channel, so that's great. We can do this because of them, so be sure to show them some love. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and like the video. I have no doubt in my mind, Duck, that we're not going to get to the open mouth Bitcoin explosion. Oh my god, emergency alert, 50,000 price prediction, whatever type of bullshit videos. But I think we can still make some decent inroads as to the YouTube metrics.
Yeah, I mean before I post those kind of pictures, I just leave the space forever, I think. You
Yeah.
couldn't pay me enough to do that shit. No thanks.
It's really cringy. You know what? Recently, the algorithm has been testing me, and it's shown me these different like crypto, YouTube, whatever type of videos, and they're all just really bad, right? They're all really bad. Some of them are clearly like non-traders talking about and non-investors, people who just clearly don't care. I wouldn't say don't understand. That might seem like putting my nose up, but these people like fundamentally don't care about markets, right? But then because everyone cares about price and price movement, they suddenly become like bootleg analysts either on the trade or investor side. And you can just tell like they don't give a shit. They don't know what they're talking about. But when you see the high, subscriber count, whatever else, and you're a beginner who's never been in this market, that's understandably going to be an authority figure for you, right? But fundamentally that content is just really bad, and you can watch 5 minutes if you know roughly what if you have a bit more experience, and you can tell that this person's full of shit. And the funny part is, I've seen this said before, like to provide value to someone, you only need to know like 5% more than they do, which is always funny because a lot of these newer participants probably have zero knowledge of markets, let alone the crypto markets specifically. So for them, like anything they say is gold dust. Whereas in reality, it's not quite the case. So that's kind of a personal pet peeve. Like when something you care about so much and you realize that there are layers and layers of complexity to it, essentially gets bastardized by someone who really doesn't give a shit but sees the engagement value in it. It's a bit sad, I suppose. That's my mini rant on on that type of content. But that's only one half. Of course, the other half is so-called traders. And the live stream that we were watching yesterday, accidentally, and this guy would literally have the chart open. And it was literally like this, right? He would circle like the top and then open the next tab. It'd be his Discord saying, we called the short here. And then he'd circle the bottom and open his Discord and say, we longed here. And basically did that for like 20, 30 minutes with 2,500 live viewers. I'm thinking, what the what the fuck is actually going on? Like, who's watching this? Why are they watching it? But yeah, that's...
Yeah, retail is back,
I
man.
had to get that rant over. You know me, man. This shit sits on my soul.
Yeah, I mean it's retail coming back, right? So I mean that kind of stuff always looks impressive. I mean those are kind of the tricks that have been going around for years and years. I mean those have been around in early 17. It's kind of like the 17 school of things where you just kind of do that. all these people just kind of trying to sell their Discord groups, whatever. Kind of sad to see that they're coming back, because I was kind of happy that it kind of got, at least in a way, like you had it less and less, and it got like a lot of negative thoughts, and like everyone was kind of bashing people that did it. Nowadays, not so much anymore.
It's kind of normalized, right? Also, people are starting to throw names into the channel. I'm not going to say who or why, but the names that mentioned is not it. For those wondering, it's whatever. You can find like dozens of channels doing the same thing. This isn't a fucking call-out video or anything. People are free to do whatever they want with their business and so on, but no, it's not the person you seem to think it is. Not that it matters, ultimately, who it was. Just that type of stuff, we've just seen it too much, right? It's been literally years of the same old thing with a similar type of business model, if it can be called that, and it doesn't really seem to go away, which is kind of weird. But I understand it. That's literally what I did in 2017. I'm not gonna be judgmental, right? Because when I joined, literally the first thing I fucking did was look for advice from people on Twitter, right? That was kind of my platform to get exposed to crypto primarily, rather than Reddit or whatever else. For me, it was Twitter, and I would DM a bunch of these people, just having really basic questions like, how many coins do you hold, and like how should I set up a portfolio, and like all of this type of shit. Like, how do wallets work, right? A few of them helped me, which was great, just for free, and kind of set me up. And this is early 2017, right? So before everything got mental. But like at least 3 out of 4 responses were essentially just knocking me. It was either automated response telling me to join their Telegram or whatever else for like it was either 0.1 or 0.3 BTC, right? Which is crazy to think about now. Or it would straight up be like, give me a surface level answer to the question, and then there would also be always be some sort of upsell, paid group, paid this, paid that to it. Like Twitter now is way better with regard to free content, and people willing to help and share, do all that kind of stuff, and that's great. But I mean, I understand it. I've been there. The first thing you want is guidance. You go to people with high follower counts or seemingly a presence, etc., and you really want to know about this market, and then they charge you for something. Like, I've been there. I understand that need to, I don't know, have someone explain something to you. But I suppose there are other ways of doing these things,
Yeah, but I mean, the free content never really gets the recognition it deserves. It's kind of how it always goes.
Yep.
Everywhere in life. If you get something for free, you don't value it. I think it's just like something to do with human psyche. Where it's the same thing with trading, right? If you're trading and you kind of got the money thrown into your lap, you're kind of like, okay, whatever. This was easy, made money. I'm just gonna risk it. And if you've worked hard for your money, kind of like grind it over the years, it's a whole different story where you're kind of like, okay, I've worked for this for years. This is valuable to me. I'm not gonna just throw it away. And I feel like that's it's the same everywhere, really, where you kind of see that same attitude. If it comes easy, it goes easy. And if you have to work, and if you have to work for it, it's a little bit different. But yeah,
very good points. Yeah, I mean, it's whatever. It's part of the cycle, I suppose, right? But yeah, it's weird. I've literally had people say that a lot of the nice comments, and I'm grateful for all of them, and those who've reached out via DMs, etc. Thanks a bunch. They're like, oh, well, I know your videos have been around for, since 2017, 18, whatever, I've seen them, but I never really looked into them because they were free. And then after spending like $2,000 on courses, literally, this is like word for word a DM. It's like, oh, I've spent like $2,000 on courses, and I finally came back to watch yours, and it was like way clearer and better than all the rest, right? But this person, it's not just like they value it less, they actively avoid free content and look to pay for stuff just because of that kind of value bias in their mind, which is kind of mental, right? But yeah, as you said, ultimately not surprising.
Yeah. But yeah, should we start with the markets?
Yeah, probably a good time. Just had to get that out of the way, and hopefully with stuff like Technical Roundup, the YouTube channel, the newsletter, etc., which are going to be free forever, essentially, at least in this form. Haha, wink, wink. No, I'm joking. We're not going anywhere with these. We can maybe help out a little bit, people who want to get a baseline understanding. Anyway, enough sanctimonious crap. Let's talk about Bitcoin first. I know the title has Altseason stuff in it, and the point of that is, in a very casual Friday manner, as far as we can anyway, We're going to discuss like rotations from Bitcoin to altcoins, the conditions like alt BTC versus alt USD pairs. We kind of want to make this a video that maybe eventually someone can clip out and send to their friends to get like an understanding of the relationships at play when it comes to these instruments, like what Altseason actually is, what are the conditions for it, where do you look for it? Because, I think it's just become, when a term gets used so much that it just loses its all meaning, and it just becomes representative of either a number of things or nothing at all. I think like Altseason's become one of them, where it's become so detached from its original context that when people say it now and have been saying it for like, I don't know, the last 2 years, it kind of doesn't mean anything. So we'll maybe try to add some meat to the bone there. As for Bitcoin, my view, I think the most simplest way I can kind of summarize it is from the daily time frame. And I want to make 2 points. The first is that this 32, 33k is still our level of support, right? So technically speaking, while that holds on a daily closing basis, support is intact, and we'll have to assume that the higher time frame and the larger conditions of uptrend, etc., are still intact. As long as that's the case, right? We haven't broken any levels of support on the way up. Even we didn't even really test any support levels on the way up either, right? So definitely breaking would be a shitty sign. But so far from the daily closes, that's been intact. The kind of short-term red flag that I'm cognizant of, and the only reason I say that is because the amount of times I've ignored daily market structure and just done really stupid things that were entirely avoidable is too damn high, right? So it's something I still pay attention to. I'm not totally in love with the current development of, we have the swing high here, we get a really strong aggressive buyback from the first retest of support, which is understandable, right? Only support, 30% correction, your standard stuff, etc. And now, instead of just that strength continuing way higher as those weak hands sold near the lows, it's arguable at this point, certainly on the daily close, it will be arguable that a lower high has been made relative to the last high. Now, is that necessarily bearish in itself? Not really, as long as sport's intact. It could very well be the case. You've got this kind of high, low, lower high, higher low, and as we know, a pattern of lower highs and higher lows is just consolidation, which isn't the craziest thing in the world. That said, that lower high is something to look out for, and I don't know about your views, Duck, but I kind of think a lot of the narratives surrounding, we just consolidate here, have Altseason, then go up, I think a lot of that is cope. I'm not terribly convinced that the volatility is just going to disappear at these prices, especially when you get really high volumes, as we did basically on the way down on the crash. I don't think it's the most reasonable or likely projection that suddenly after such a volatile move we just start moving sideways for a long time and risk goes to altcoins. Certainly if we cast back to 2017, I'm not a fractals guy or anything, but those 30% dumps and these sharp bull market corrections, they were bull market corrections in cases where they ended up having an acceleration kind of effect on the market, right? You'd correct 30%, market gets slammed, it bounces, and those bottom sellers essentially get hosed because we just basically rip straight up a week or maximum 2 weeks later, right? More or less. The idea that, you have this really corrective move on a high volume, then the market just moves sideways, I don't know, at the moment at least, I find that far less plausible as an explanation. So yeah, that's kind of the Bitcoin view. Daily support intact, fine. Be aware of market structure as it's developing. And I think, unfortunately as well, as much as I'd love to sit here and LARP that, okay, well, if this breaks, you sell a retest, etc., I really don't think that's a plausible pattern. If we lose support, it'll probably look more like support's been lost and we already closed like 30% below it again, and then who knows how the fuck you trade that, right? This kind of dream scenario of, okay, support's clearly broken, I'm selling a clear retest and I've got a clear whatever, far less likely. I think if we lose 33k, it's more of a kind of rush for the exit, more so than orderly queue for the retest. That's kind of my view at the moment. Just generally going to be informed by daily closes at support, but I'm going to be monitoring market structure now that it looks like we've got another swing high, which is a lower high forming on that time frame. That was a lot, but I think it's kind of has the main themes that I'm looking at.
I agree. It's a parabolic move, right? So when you have a parabolic move, it's kind of unlikely. Should I screen share or should I?
If you want, man, whatever. If you want to cover something, feel free.
It's a parabolic move in general. It's very unlikely to kind of expect it to just, like, the volatility to just disappear. Just makes no sense to me. I mean, I'd love for it to do that. If this kind of goes and ranges in here and goes sideways, that would be a good kind of environment to trade altcoins in.
Yeah.
I'm like, it definitely would be. It's just, is that gonna happen? Like, I don't think so. I'd be very surprised. Like, consolidation like this at an all-time high without having like a major correction before, just doesn't really happen too many. Like, I can't remember the last time that has happened, where it's just consolidation in a constructive way anyway. Like, if we consolidated in here, I'd start getting worried of like this kind of thing repeating again. So I think like the more likely scenario is that it's either gonna invalidate the bears, just keep on going, or it's just gonna fall back down. And I'm kind of in the same boat. I think if 33K fails here, we're just gonna trade like immediately to the next support, which is 26. Even more so now that we have this kind of structure here, which is worrisome, as you said. So I mean, this is a support to watch still. Agreed on that front too. And I don't think you could expect anything other than like very volatile next few weeks still. Just, I mean, the price gone up vertically. You'd expect it to go like to continue to go up vertically or correct and then kind of slow down and then creep back up again. I don't think there's going to be any kind of, I mean, I'd just be very, very surprised if this happens. I'd love it, but I would be very surprised. It's not historically how Bitcoin likes to play out.
I think what's also interesting is I talked on Monday about those kind of big liquidation days that we had. The last one, which is obviously on the 4th of January, right? This is like, I don't know, there's like 2 billion there market wide of leveraged wiped. And then there's literally one day closes bullishly and then we went straight up and made a higher high, right?
Yeah.
And then we had a similar liquidation type of wipe event happen on this pullback, right? On the 11th or on that Monday. And the reaction hasn't been, even though the liquidations themselves were higher, right? And this move was bigger, we haven't seen that same type of follow through quite yet. And I just think generally, if this shit starts to consolidate, it's like, well, why is it consolidating after this 30% correction, right? Because that should have been the dip to buy. Are people just getting like endless opportunities to get on board that? Or perhaps even phrasing it alternatively, who the fuck is selling if the market's so strong after a 30% correction, unless there's a, cause to think that it's going to go deeper than that 30%. I suppose the long story short summary on Bitcoin is that support needs to hold, and expecting consolidation for the time being is just generally not the most likely outcome, right? I think it's a decent summary.
Yeah.
And for all we know, this could just be a higher low right here, right? I've got a level here, for God's sake. Maybe something cool happens. This isn't the place where you just panic and say, "Oh my God, it's a higher low, it's all over." It's just worth monitoring these things, how they develop. I want to talk about like a trade that almost triggered for me, actually, and it's also something that gets me or got me cautious, certainly. When we had the bounce, so as the market was making its way down towards this high time frame level, I mean, whatever, market structure was bearish, etc., etc. Then within the level itself, there was a lot of really shitty looking price action at 32 to 33k. Even on that short video clip we made, my argument was fairly straightforward, which is that the level is currently acting as resistance. And when it starts acting as support, then we'll probably trade towards, and this is essentially the target, the weekly open, and maybe even, which happened in this case, the low of that inside day, which was the cause or the context for the breakdown in the first place, right? There was a pretty clear flip at that level, both in terms of just price support resistance, but also just how the market was trading on lower time frames. Just eyeballing this, if you spend enough time on the charts, it looks a lot like resistance here, looks far more like support at this instance, right? Which seemed reasonably straightforward. So my idea, when we got all the way back up to the weekly open, I was really tempted to start essentially longing on this breakout here within these two candles, right? And the reasoning for that was, well, it looks like daily support has been resolved positively, and now we're back within an old range, which was the inside day low, which was resistance here, right? And it was looking, let me actually go to replay mode, it might even be clearer that way, kind of what I was sort of eyeing up, right? Let's say at this point, oh, come on, work with me here, hold on. Replay, sure, let's go for that. So kind of at this point, is when I was getting a bit angsty and hunting longs, which ultimately led to nothing, didn't trigger. And again, the reasoning for the setup was, well, the breakdown, which we discussed ahead of time conveniently, was this inside day low, spiked, usually a bullish setup, but instead failed, acted as resistance. That's bearish. But now, when the market's up here, what's kind of happened between A and B, because there's similar prices, well, between A and B, we retested daily support. It flipped from acting as resistance to acting as support, and then kind of just went up only, right? That's super cool. So the setup that I was tempted to take is essentially, we've now traded back within the inside day low and above the weekly opens. That's kind of your confluence of support, and treating it as a range trade. That we've reclaimed the bottom of the range, which was resistance here, and now the idea is going to be the top of the range towards the inside day high, and then maybe higher towards all-time high. It just didn't trigger for me, didn't feel right, didn't act on it. And in itself, you know, that's something I talk about a lot, is when good bullish setups fail, I get a bit uncertain, or that's usually bearish, and when good bearish setups fail, that's usually a good sign. So in this case, again, looking at what happened here, that in itself is not the best thing, that the market had kind of a lot of confluence and reasons to bounce here, but it didn't, and we retraced much deeper to support at 35k. I mean, if we get up there again, maybe that idea will be valid. I think a bounce play from 35k is 35 to 34k is a reasonable kind of do or die level. I don't know about you personally, Duck, but at least not on the limit order blind basis. I'm not rebuying 32 to 33 unless I see something really compelling or a good reason to do so, simply because of how I've literally traded it in the past here, with no massive success.
I mean, for me, it's kind of like on the low time frames now, because there's this one I can actually show it real quick. So the daily, I've talked about this last stream where I was like, okay, this is the first time that we're testing it. Pretty convenient. That was exactly on the stream day. First time that we're testing it, makes sense that it holds, right? Yeah. This kind of like sell off. Then we bounced, but at the same day I said, if we retest it again, there's a much, much higher likelihood that it actually fails. So you want to have it retested once. You don't want to have it go there again, because I mean, one thing that we haven't had this entire rally is, like, we've had some support tests, but we've never had multiple of the same kind of, like, at least not from like this kind of view where you do something like this, bounce and support several times. What always happened is you kind of establish support, move up higher, and then just go from there, right? So you don't want to test that again. I think, like, for the bulls, what you really want to be seeing is this to hold, and I think that's going to be where people are looking at towards the daily close today. And in general, like, I don't think if we go back to 30, 33, that is actually a buy. Like, I wouldn't want to buy it. I think that is way too likely to roll over. And I mean, it's the second test. Usually I have no problem with buying a second test. The problem with this is that we're in a parabolic move, right? So if we second test it and it actually fails, you're going to get like massive price action to the downside where you get slipped. And if you trade any kind of size, you just don't get out again, right? So, I mean, for me, that's a no-go. I'm looking at the 4 hour. And I'm looking kind of at this support that, like, it was resistance, like we broke down. You can kind of see the wick into massive reaction. Broke down, retested it, and then just played around it a couple of times, right? So I'm looking at this 4 hour kind of support resistance level here. Yeah. And I think if that fails, I'd expect us to go into the daily level. And like I said, I don't want to be involved there. So for me, this is kind of the do or die level. Like, I wouldn't want to be bearish into this. Yeah. I think if it does roll over, that's going to be the early warning sign, because, I mean, you don't want to be involved here, or at least I don't want to. I mean, it might hold again. It's just not something that I would want to risk, because the thing is, like, if it rolls over and you're in a position, you're going to slip 1, 2, 3, 4K maybe. And I like, that's not for me, right? There's no kind of way to kind of risk manage that. If you're positioning yourself, right? Like that. Yeah, I mean, you can't play around slippage like that. I think it just wouldn't make sense. So for me, this is the level to hold. If it does hold, I think, and we start going back up again, I would never want to short this area again. No. If I was trading it, I'd expect it to go much, much higher, right? So it's kind of like this neat kind of setup where you have a very, very strict support level that you want to see hold, and then you have resistance that is basically non-existent up here because,
Right.
I mean, yes, we got rejected from this area, but we've tested it already, and it's the same situation that I talked about earlier, where it's like, if you test this again, I would never want to bet on that, like, holding, just based on the fact that if it does roll over, you're going to get slipped to oblivion too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same situation to the up and the
Yeah,
downside.
it's a really tough environment, right? Because essentially dealing with range boundaries that slip into Slip City if they break, and that you're not betting on the best levels in the world either.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the situation where you have your range and it's a very, very good one, but you don't want to bet on the extremes, which is not something that is usually the case. Usually you want to trade the extremes of the range just based on the fact that those are the best levels that you're going to have. The problem with that is, in this instance, everyone is looking at those levels. We're in a parabolic kind of environment. So, I mean, you're going to have a lot of people positioning themselves there. And yeah, it's just the risk, in my opinion, is too high to kind of just go aggressive there. If you want to just take a punt, that's fine. I still think the daily support down here, I mean, that's the best level that you're going to have. But like I said, like for me, second test on something like that, a no-go. The first test was pretty nice. I like the first test. I've liked pretty much all the first tests of these supports.
Yeah.
Just based on the fact that, I mean, when you have infinite bid and you test something, like you actually test the support, that's pretty nice confluence to have, where you have like this institutional dip buying meme in confluence with, okay, you're actually a technical support too. It kind of like that narrative kind of goes out the window when you actually start testing support like a million times.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see.
Where's
we'll
that
see.
intraday red box for you? Let's just give the audience maybe a kind of rough understanding of where the intraday pivots
You mean,
are. Is that 35?
Yeah, that's 35 to 34, basically.
Okay. So 34, 35. My intraday level is also on 35 flat. So that's kind of, 35, 34. If potentially, you could even just use this whole consolidation pre-breakout, right? So here, this is kind of your intraday support and probably the best candidate for a higher low, right? If you're looking from a bullish point of view, if you're looking for higher highs and higher lows, this last big swing low, I don't really count this. Then you have a swing high here. And then the question is, the market, so you've got kind of low, high, higher low, higher high. Then the question is, if you're expecting bullish market structure or continuation, you want a higher low. Next question, what is a kind of reasonable candidate, at least from a trading point of view, for that higher low to form? For us, it seemingly lines up at 35, 34. Is it still valid? Could you potentially still get a higher low at 33, 32, the daily support? The answer is yes, but it's less attractive to trade for the other reasons stated. That's probably as clear as you can make it. Of course, let us know if you have any questions. That's kind of our view on the market, I think.
The thing is, like, if it wicks to 32 and then immediately closes back above that, like 4-hour level, that's fine.
Yeah, you don't want to be stopped down with the support, which also makes it quite difficult, right?
Yeah, I mean, in these kind of instances, I don't really mind that. Like, you can always reposition, but the thing is, like, if you get stopped out on a move like that and you reposition and then it actually goes back down, then it's like 100% or like almost 100% certain that that's gonna lead to like a massive nuke. It's the one thing that you don't want to see is when you have a bullish setup, you take it and then you get stopped out, and that's fine. Sometimes you just get sometimes people just hunt these kind of levels and you just get rolled over once and then reposition because the setup is still valid, and then you get stopped out again. Like, that's a massive sign of weakness. We've had those before. Every time I see them, it leads to kind of market-wide sell-offs. So that's the one thing that you don't want to see. It would kind of look like this, where you roll over here, wick back above, and then actually start rolling over again. Like, that would be where one situation where I'm completely fine just shorting support, because that's almost always going to break down. So that's the one thing that you don't want to see on the bull side. Not only for the reason that, okay, this is going to probably roll over massively, but also because you're going to take several hits at once, because you're going to get wrecked here on the first leg, and then you're going to reposition and you're going to get wrecked again. I mean, that's trading for you. Sometimes that shit just happens.
Good point.
The only kind of way to kind of not fall for it is just experience. And even that sometimes, I mean, it
As we
sometimes
all
happens.
know, right?
Yeah.
Also, just 2 points to make before we move on to altcoins. From a time frame point of view, what you explained there can also be rephrased to say that if the market is actually strong, there's no way that a daily bounce should be turning away at 4-hour resistance, right?
Yeah.
That's like a weird. Whenever your time frame hierarchy flips, that's always something to look out for. Like in a strong trend, you'd expect higher time frame levels to lead to higher time frame support to roll over lower time frame resistance, generally, right? So when you see a shift in that behavior, that suddenly your bounces from higher time frame support are getting sold into at lower time frame resistance, that in itself is a red flag if it happens, right? Kind of shifting behavior to watch out for. The second point is, I think someone asked in the chat what we mean by kind of you get slipped here or slippage there. Slippage is essentially the difference between where your order to execute is, well, what you actually put as the order price versus where it's executed in reality, right? So it's not the kind of trading isn't perfect and exchange execution, etc., isn't perfect for a myriad of reasons, including depth and the amount of people trading a level and how the trading engine actually matches orders, etc. But when price moves quickly, it can skip over prices. And when you have a market order, let's say on a stop loss, you're essentially saying, give me a full fill, like fill my order exactly at or as close as possible to this price, which is X. And if there are just not enough orders at this price, which is X, to fill your full order, the market will keep reaching lower in the long example to fill you at your full price. And so slippage is the discrepancy essentially between where you told the platform to execute your order and when it gets executed in reality or functionally. And so when you get these levels which end up being super crowded, or when there's a lot of volatility at those levels, those two things together being the worst combo, if you're on the wrong side and a lot of people have similar orders at similar prices, the market will have to reach much lower to basically fill all of those. And so where you think your risk is, whereas where your risk is in reality, end up being quite divergent concepts. I think that's what it means.
Yep. I mean, it's just basically you're trying to you have a stop loss. You're like, okay, my risk is managed because I have a stop loss, and then suddenly your account is gone.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
I've literally been there. I've been slipped like multiples of my risk before. It's not fun at all. And you feel so responsible, like, oh, I've got a stop loss. Then you check the candle. It's like 20% in an hourly candle. And you just know you got fucked, right?
Yep. I mean, one of my first experiences with futures, with Bitcoin futures and BitMEX was actually like way back in the day. I was avoiding funding for something. I think I don't even remember like the full circumstances, but I was trying to avoid funding. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna trade the futures, and then the bottom. I think it was the bottom fell just like straight out. And it traded like 20% below spot prices. Ooh. And then like I learned like what like a 1K slippage kind of looked like, even worse when that's kind of happening at like 6, 7, 8K, where it's just that stuff hurts. And you kind of have to be aware that can happen if you're trading the most crowded kind of levels. And it's kind of like that's the one best thing I think that experiences teaches you is when you kind of feel that the market is going to make a big move in one or the other direction, and that you kind of that you're able to prepare for this kind of like massive slippage in one way or the other. Yep. Because if you're not used to the market and you're just looking at it and it's just like trucking along, going like sideways, whatever, and you're trading that range happily, and you're not noticing that something explosive is building, and you have like a stop loss set somewhere or like a take profit set somewhere reasonably close, you just get rolled over. And then if you do know that that's happening, I think this is kind of what's happening right now. We're building up to something very explosive. It's not entirely like I'm not entirely sure where it's gonna go. Like I said, well, if we test daily support again, I could see that fail in a spectacular fashion. Same thing with resistance, if we go back to resistance. And in those kind of instances, when you're betting the house on something, you gotta be prepared that they're gonna take more than the house in that kind of move.
I think that's a benefit that people forget when it comes to like futures trading in crypto, that you can't go past bankruptcy, right? Like you literally, if you trade like Forex or a lot of these equities, like just traditional futures, a lot of the time the documentation will be like full KYC, And then the way you can use margin on those platforms is you can actually go beyond bankrupt, right? You can actually end up owing the exchange more money than you put on the account, which is something we don't do in crypto. I mean, maybe we effectively do it because we just keep redepositing to make it all back in one trade, but at least functionally we don't have that, which is cool, but also why the margin requirements are so much higher in crypto, right? Because
I mean, I know that Europe doesn't allow that anymore. You can't lose more than you that you have, but I'm not entirely sure if America has.
I mean, we just
these
can't
rules.
trade anything in Europe, right? It's just like slowly, week by week, the noose gets tighter. But yeah, I think we spent more than enough time on Bitcoin. Maybe some hopefully helpful lessons. Long story short, daily support 32, 33. Trading it is probably going to be a bit of a shitfest if it gets down there. Immediate support, a lot of important stuff lining up at 34, 35. That's kind of where the higher low is probably best made, if there is going to be one. As for resistance, it's just not amazing, to be honest. And if we have trend continuation, generally it's not really the right environment to look for amazing levels of resistance to sell. And from a macro point of view, consolidation at the moment is just kind of a less likely outcome than something more trend worthy until proven otherwise. That's it. Let's talk about Altseason, right? Which is, I know, like your favorite topic in the world. But as mentioned in the beginning of the session, in a very casual Friday manner, we'll maybe try to maybe define it, give it some meaning, provide some context, reasonable expectations, and so on. Like what it actually means, where it comes from. I didn't mean fully dive into the lore necessarily, right? But to really set some standards as to what Altseason actually looks like and how to prepare for it, whatever. So I might start just really briefly. For me, at least, Altseason can be roughly defined as a period of time where the overwhelming majority of altcoins indiscriminately outperform their Bitcoin pairs for a meaningful period of time of like 1 week or longer. Or phrased alternatively, when the majority of altcoin Bitcoin pairs trend strongly and bullishly in their alt BTC pairs. That's kind of my understanding and I suppose conventional wisdom, if there is such a thing, of what Altseason means. So it doesn't mean a certain basket. By the way, there is no canon to this, right? It can mean whatever you want it to mean. You be you, inclusion, coexist, 2021 and all that stuff. But this is kind of maybe a more useful framework, or what it means to me, or what most participants kind of envisage that term to mean. So it's not when a USD pair on an altcoin just rips higher. It's not, for me at least, when like a basket of altcoins in a certain sector, like DeFi or yield farming, whatever, outperforms for smaller windows of time. It really is a market-wide alt BTC pair bullish trend in an almost indiscriminate fashion. And the only real determining factor is the next one to pump is the one that hasn't pumped yet. Rather than any sort of huge fundamental factors. So I don't know, do you want to add on to that, or agree, disagree as far as the early defining term stuff?
No, I agree. I mean, it's basically the time where you don't get sleep, because if you sleep, you miss another 5x or 10x. I mean, like, people are looking at these altcoins now, and they're looking at the leveraged options that they have, and then something moves 10-15% in their favor, and then they're getting like totally euphoric. It's not something like back in the day when we were calling stuff Altseason, or when Altseason actually happened, like 10% we wouldn't even have talked about. So I mean, we got like pumps of ×2, ×3, ×4, ×5 in a day, just moving from one coin to another, and that kind of stuff. Yeah, so not necessarily what people nowadays like. A lot of people have been saying that Altseason has been around for like half a year already, which doesn't really line with the view that, okay, the altcoin Bitcoin pairs have to outperform. Mm-hmm. I can't agree on that, honestly. Like, if you're saying that Altseason, like this time period where altcoins are performing particularly well, has happened this year, besides like maybe a tiny DeFi season that I could I could see that kind of be discussed. But I mean, if that were the case, I'd be pretty sad, because honestly, it's not been particularly impressive what's been happening on the altcoins the last 2 years. It's just been going down.
Okay, so I mean, the immediate question, and this is sort of to build further upon this, is what is the relationship between altcoins or Altseason and Bitcoin, right? So I'll maybe start again, and we can work through some basic rules, maybe. But as mentioned in the first definition, I think, at least to be accurate or to make it worthwhile, for Altseason, the altcoin just has to outperform Bitcoin for a meaningful period of time. Ideally, like a multi-week trend, at least, right? Not like a fun pump that gets fully retraced. None of those shenanigans. I mean, like multi-week trends on the Bitcoin pair. And in terms of, so the first requirement is to basically outperform Bitcoin. And I think that's important because most people, by virtue of being in crypto, are net long Bitcoin, right? So they're exposed to the underlying movements in Bitcoin. Also, especially when the market's bullish, that's kind of your benchmark, or whatever you want to call it, the index that you need to seek to outperform. So if you're punting altcoin trades, and you're underperforming, literally doing nothing and taking no risk holding Bitcoin, then what's the so-called point of alt season if it's essentially Bitcoin season? I suppose that's one way of phrasing it, right? And the second point with regard to BTC is that generally, and there have been some exceptions to this recently, especially with DeFi stuff, kind of a sectoral outperformance, but I suppose historically, generally, alt season is inversely correlated with Bitcoin volatility. Right? So when Bitcoin kind of calms down or consolidates or is in a range, etc., there's a capital rotation, but it looks fine, right? There's no reason to assume that the market's going to nuke or that crypto is going to get dragged down, etc. There's a capital rotation that takes place within the ecosystem, if you will, from just trading the majors and or Bitcoin to slightly more risky instruments such as altcoins, because the market looks healthy, Bitcoin looks boring, so let's punt crypto in another shape, and that other shape is altcoins. So those are kind of my 2 points with regard to Bitcoin outperformance and also correlations with Bitcoin volatility. So even applying that right now, a lot of the time, if the market looks somewhat precarious, and then it's certainly 10% swings, etc., that's why you see like a mix of red and green and unique outperformers. I suppose just everything going up on Binance, and you can just buy anything and make money, right? What do you think about those 2 points with regard to outperformance and volatility when it comes to Bitcoin, or just any comments on the relationship between the two?
No, I agree. It's kind of like to kind of answer a question that someone said in the chat. The person said, I really don't see how you could say altcoins have been bad the last 2 years. There were multiple 100x's in 2020. And I mean, there might have been, right? But there's a million altcoins, and if there's 3 or 4 that go up more than Bitcoin does, I mean, that doesn't mean altcoins in general are doing well. It's just like 1 or 2 coins doing well.
The exception doesn't make the rule, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, if you have a lot of people kind of sitting in the chat, probably sitting in altcoins, suffering, and then we always have these kind of experts come in and are saying, okay, yeah, altcoins have been doing really well. And I know exactly that people are just sitting there cringing, seeing their Bitcoin value go down like at least like 50% this year. Because, I mean, let's be real, most people are just kind of all in altcoins, always have been. So, I mean, I just can't subscribe to that fact. I think like when you have Altseason, or when altcoins actually do well in general as a sector, everyone kind of agrees, just based on the fact that everything is going up so mentally that you couldn't not agree.
You won't see a Bitcoin chart on your entire bloody Twitter feed if this stuff's happening, right? Like, it just becomes crazy. It's like becomes the sole focus of these things, especially in altcoin Bitcoin pairs. Like, those things really start cycling and people start paying attention. Catching kind of pumps on USD pairs isn't the kind of orthodox definition, at least, of this kind of stuff. And it's, it's kind of setting the standard too low as well. Because otherwise, if you're like marginally outperforming Bitcoin, maybe on some days, like, is it really the point? Like, the example I love to use is BNB, right? And that's not a personal knock on BNB. I think it's fine, whatever. I'm really agnostic. I don't care. But if you look at the USD pair, like, even on the weekly time frame, or the daily time frame, this thing looks incredible, right? Like, that's a bloody strong trend on the daily. Like, where the March crashed at like $10 or thereabouts, and it's up to 40 now, right? Which is a lot. Like this thing has just looks super bullish. Altseason because BNB, big coin, big exchange, it's gone up. Then you look at BNB against BTC. I mean, look at this thing, right? Look at this chronic it's like the inverse, essentially, as you'd expect, right? This chronic underperformance. So if you're holding BNB, for example, in that period, and you're celebrating all the new all-time highs and the USD pair going mental, etc., you'd still be significantly better off, as is clearly shown by the BNB BTC chart, just holding Bitcoin, which you can then, use for a million other purposes, and not be just exposed to one altcoin necessarily. So I think that's where a lot of the dissonance comes in. People just look at the price of their altcoin in isolation and see that it's performing well or it's trending up. So they think it's alt season because they are in altcoins and they are making money, not realizing that if you're underperforming Bitcoin, kind of what's the fucking point, right? That's my view, at least. So that's why I think BTC pairs are still important, because if holding Bitcoin is the risk-free rate in this ecosystem, so to speak, and you're underperforming the index or whatever you want to call it, then maybe your decisions aren't so great. And I think another point must be made. This is something we've discussed between ourselves privately, is we know a lot of people that have been... I mean, they've just been completely destroyed by holding altcoins literally since 2016, 2017. Like, straight up, crypto is doing well, but there are people who've just been losing for years on end. And even as Bitcoin and sets double its all-time high and Ethereum goes from like $80 to $1,000, these people are just still losing or winning very, very marginally, because for them, they've just been in altcoins, in all the wrong ones, and holding bags, etc. From that point. So even if you're all in crypto, they haven't benefited and have actually lost in many cases, because they've just exposed themselves to the market in essentially the wrong way, which is crazy to think about, right? Like Bitcoin all over the headlines, ETH, everything mega mooning, new DeFi coins up like 1000x, and some people are still wrecked because they're still holding the same altcoins. So what alt season, right? That to me is crazy. Not to mention the fact that we know from post 2017 bull market, I don't think anything got more people wrecked and out of the space than allocating to altcoins at the same time, right? At the wrong time. Like the amount of... It may seem impossible now at these current prices that, okay, I've made so much since Bitcoin broke 20k or even way before that I can't see myself ever losing a significant portion of this. Well, some people lost all they made in 2017 and then some in 2018 because they timed the altcoin market at the wrong time, right? And so they rolled those Bitcoin profits without paying taxes on them, without setting aside tax money for them, into altcoins, and then Bitcoin corrected, and then altcoins corrected as well. And so people literally participated and made money in a full, crazy, retail mania bull cycle, and literally a year later were broke and couldn't pay a tax bill because of decisions associated with their altcoin allocation. It's like we might sound like super, I don't know, not bearish, but like grumpy old men talking about alt seasons when everything goes up only and nothing else counts. But first of all, that's not strictly our view. But second of all, there's good reason for that type of caution, because we've seen where it ends up taking people, even from the most, from the highest heights and all that type of stuff. It's genuinely pretty scary, like how some people have ended up because of how they've played this side of the crypto market, I think that's an important point.
If you haven't been around for a long time, you kind of don't know these stories, but there's been a lot of people that have been very, very early, and that they kind of saw the crypto trend coming, and then they just took the wrong risk on the wrong coin, and then just never participated again, basically. And I mean, I'm not gonna be like mega bearish when Bitcoin's at 40k and these altcoins are just like at all-time lows against Bitcoin. But one thing to note is that a lot of altcoins have gone to near zero or lost pretty much all their volume, so you couldn't even trade even if you wanted to. So I mean, considering that there's almost no risk of Bitcoin going to zero, and considering that a lot of altcoins in history have gone to zero, you would expect that if altcoins really start going, that they as a whole start going really hard, right? It's basically if you want to buy an altcoin, you would have to kind of assume that you're in for like a massive boom, because if you're not, you're kind of taking a lot of risk, and that risk is hidden beneath. Okay, this altcoin just went down 5% against Bitcoin, and now 5% again against Bitcoin. But the problem is, like, at some point you just get down so far the rabbit hole that you don't want to be. Okay, you're like, okay, I already lost 80% on this altcoin. I don't want to just cut my losses and then just move on. And then at some point it's just gone, right? It's all gone, and Bitcoin's trading at 40K. That's a risk that is there when you're trading the altcoins. That's not a risk that is there, at least in my opinion, if you're trading Bitcoin. So, like, that kind of risk is a massive one, right? If you have a lot of money in altcoins. So you would expect in general for an Altseason, in my opinion, that's why I've kind of been like, making fun of is maybe a strong word, but I still have it on my Nano chart, for example. I've always kind of said, okay, every kind of bounce is an Altseason. And I mean, if this is all an Altseason for you, right? You've been getting wrecked over and over and over again, even though you've went through like a million Altseasons. And the problem with this, like the problem that I have with this, is that the moment you're gonna be right is the moment you're gonna be so wrecked that it doesn't really matter anymore, right? Like, if you're playing this 10 times over and you get wrecked every single time, and then you're right on the 11th time and you only have like 100 of the balance left that you started with, or like the Bitcoin left that you started with, even if this pumps 50x, you're still going to be down. So these altcoin cycles, they have to be timed really, really well. But if you time them well, there's a lot of money to be made. It's just these windows, like, if, for example, if you look at Litecoin, right? And let me actually make this so it's easier to see. So what you had is, let me actually go to a longer time frame chart, one that I can clear out. Okay, so you look at this, right? What is Altseason? And the easiest answer is, like, you have these 3, 4, 5 weeks of positive price action that push this so far up that everyone basically in the entire cycle that's traded is basically back break even, at least, right? The problem is the person that bought it here has gone through so much pain that there's either no way that they're holding anymore, or they're just back to break even before the next leg down, right? But these kind of moves, they're massive. So if you're trading for them, if you're trying to catch this and you actually do catch it, I mean, that can be life-changing money,
Or just
right?
a fraction, right? Like a couple of weeks out of a multi-week trend, even. There's like a lot on the table there, more so than like 20% or whatever.
The thing is, like, if you're kind of trying to aim for a trend, because what this essentially is, right? I mean, this is a little bit more. This is one of the ones that hasn't gone like this. Like, most altcoins just move like this. Litecoin's kind of with like a little bit of a downwards trajectory, but in general, just kind of ranged in here, high time frame wise. But the thing is, like, if you bought this at the wrong time, you're not going to be able to be objective when it actually comes to a bottom, right? I mean, if you're sitting in this and you're already down 50% and then it goes down another 50%, because I mean, if you look at this is another 50%, even though it's already dropped a shitload, you're not going to be in the right state of mind to kind of take advantage of a boom like this. And in my opinion, like, that's where the real danger is. One, you kind of get married to what you bought and then you just never let go. And this is a fortunate case, right? Because this didn't go to zero. I can show you charts of coins that I've traded in the past that they're just not there anymore, right? So this is like an outlier in the sense that it hasn't gone to zero. It's Litecoin. A lot of people know about it, and it's still basically trading near all-time lows.
It's a multi-year downtrend, right? Let's call it
what it is. This is a downtrend. And I mean, the thing is, like, a lot of people have kind of noticed that shorting Bitcoin when it's going like this is not necessarily the best idea, right? A lot of people have tried since we broke 20K, or like even earlier. Like, I mean, my last serious try was 12 to 10. And I mean, I would say in hindsight, maybe that wasn't the best idea. I mean, it worked out for me, but maybe that wasn't the best idea. But if you already know that this is a bad idea, right? Shorting like the strongest uptrend there is longing the strongest downtrend that you know really the best idea? And I mean, like looking at this, betting on Altseason too early in a downtrend like this, I mean, it's just basically picking a top for Bitcoin. It's just the inverse, right? You're trying to be the hero that longs the bottom, and on Bitcoin, you're kind of trying to be the hero that shorts the top. And that is not easy to do, and most people won't do it, and most people kind of just lose their balance while trying. So yeah, it's not as easy as it sounds, and you have like every single low on this chart. I can guarantee you that I can go back through my Twitter history and give you 15 names where people called Altseason for literally every single one of these. And something that I try to avoid whenever I'm like not 100% sure that it's going to happen. So far, I've been right. There might be a time where I'm going to be making fun of someone for saying Altseason and it actually happens. But I plan to buy into the rip in those cases anyway. So, I mean, if I played all of these Altseasons, and I mean, I did long some of these, I would be considerably less wealthy than I am now, just based on the fact that, I mean, this is brutal. Like, this is really, really brutal. It's 90% from here. It's down 97% against Bitcoin. I mean, just imagine that. Just imagine having bought EOS at the top with a Bitcoin, and you're now basically holding nothing anymore.
Because the crazy part is, right, as we mentioned, the importance of measuring against Bitcoin, given that's what you hold anyway, and the chance of Bitcoin going to zero are far lower, etc. If you're like constantly long altcoins, that means you essentially look at this Bitcoin weekly chart and you're thinking, yeah, that's not enough. Or I can do better than that, right? I can outperform this thing, which is interesting, right? You're certainly setting a high bar for yourself, because you're allocating either BTC or USD to trading something else in the hopes that you can outperform basically holding what this chart looks like, right? And what's the fucking likelihood of that? At least for meaningful periods of time, like days and weeks. Not particularly high. For those asking, like, okay, so what do we do with altcoins, or what's interesting? I don't know, your answer, Duck. Mine is to first of all, look at newer stuff. I actually agree with Cobain, who was on Shitcoin Talk and said he's not a fan of betting on like multiple cycles for altcoins. I totally agree. And I think just history's proven that to be a reasonably reliable assumption as well. So the first thing I'd say is look at the newer stuff. Like DeFi is still pretty pertinent in that regards. That's one thing. And second of all, set really and look for three things. Second of all, look for clearly trending instruments in that space, like really clear uptrends, higher highs, higher lows, etc., all that good stuff. Thirdly would be if for some reason or for any reason those positively trending conditions shift or turn bearish or something which never happened, or like in the newsletter we used a simple example, right? So by the way, Technical Roundup has been really bloody good recently. If you don't read it, I mean, whatever. That's on you. But it's free, and go subscribe and read it. It comes once a week. We don't email you a single time with anything else, so go check it out. So one thing we said about, for example, the DeFi altcoin stuff is if your altcoin looks like this, where, you know, it makes a high, then it makes a higher high, and then tests this as support, and then does the same thing, right? It just creates this pattern that's incredibly reliable with regard to how it's trending. And then one of the times it fails, right? It comes down to the same level, which worked, you know, here, you know, trend intact, and you've got like a reliable metric which you can apply to the market. And then if for some reason it fails, and let's say loses that level here, at that point you should get the fuck out, right? Like, forget it, because what's been keeping you in the trend, in the trade, and what's been an indicator of the trend is this behavioral pattern of that high flip to low type of thing. If for any reason it stops happening, just exit, right? Could it be the case that it reclaims and goes higher? Sure, but then you can re-enter if it does so. But I think what gets most people wrecked when it comes to trend trading altcoins, which was a whole section in the newsletter from last week, is that they don't set conditions for what happens or what would it look like if the trend were to reverse. And so when you get that type of break or shift in behavior, they're just so used to buying dips that they kind of ignore the context and end up buying the dip here, here, as the market essentially retraces and whatever goes to zero in a kind of hyperbolic way. So that's an important thing. So point number one would be look at the new stuff. Point number two would be set clear conditions. Well, number two is the stuff that's trending. So new stuff, trending. Number 3 is set clear criteria for what constitutes that trend or what's your reason for being bullish, so that if it changes, you can get out pretty aggressively. Whether that's the high flip to low, or if it makes a higher high and always sets a higher low in like a similar phase, right? That's another one you can go for. So basically, like, find a pattern of behavior. It's like if you're playing Dark Souls or something and you're fighting those bosses, you kind of know what their moveset is. I know it's like a shitty example, but kind of that level of recognition, you know what I mean, right? You kind of know that he does this at this phase and all that type of shit. Like, I think gamifying trends in that regard is actually not the worst idea in the world. And in the 4th point, which I'll make in brackets because it's slightly less important but still relevant, is still look at the BTC pair of that new altcoin DeFi pair, whatever. If the BTC pair is breaking out, or it looks like it's at support or the bottom of the range, whatever, the chances are that all of this stuff will work better and the USD pair will outperform. If the BTC pair is broken down or looks like a bearish retest at resistance, or you have reason to think it'll underperform, then not only is it less likely to, does it make less sense to trade against Bitcoin, but it's likely that even your USD trade won't be as good as it could have been. So that's another thing to monitor there. Like, sushi is a really good example, something we've been following in the newsletter since, like, I don't know, fucking $2 or $3 or something ridiculous. Every time Sushi USD moons, Sushi's BTC looked good as well. And when YFI USD was underperforming, YFI BTC looked like trash as well. So they're still useful, even if you're trading in the cash pairs, to get an understanding of A, performance relative to Bitcoin, and B, setting expectations for the USD pair, even if you don't care about performance relative to Bitcoin, just gauging relative strength. So I don't think the alt BTC pair goes anywhere, even if you're trading the new stuff. At least you're leaving information on the table unnecessarily if you do that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, to kind of bring it to a point why I dislike everyone calling Altseason is because if you call Altseason, right, what you're doing is you're looking for that knockout trade that I've shown you on Litecoin, right? You're looking for that 600%. It's very, very different from just ordinarily trading a trending asset. Like, this is trending downwards, right? If you don't want to short it, which I think is fair, I mean, the risk you're taking on shorting altcoins is pretty damn high. I mean, there's people out there to hunt you if you're building like bigger positions. And I mean, in general, that these can squeeze higher than you can remain solvent, right? But if you only want to play them on the upside, right? You can play these. You can trade these. Like, there's been a couple trades, even like on Litecoin for me. Like, I've traded this to, I think, in here somewhere without ever saying, I mean, I might have said like jokingly Altseason, whatever, but I've traded this as a trade without expecting a knockout 600, 700, 800% kind of run. I was just expecting it to run, right? And then I took it as a trade and got out as a trade, not expecting the moon. And then it dumped. And then I took another trade. And I mean, I've been mostly longing Litecoin in this downtrend. And I can't remember the last time I've lost money with it, right? The only difference between like me and these people that are screaming Altseason is that I get in and I want to get out again. I don't want to get in, aim for 600%, aim for this big Altseason, and then stay in no matter what happens. Because what happens is, let's say I bought this with the intention of Altseason here, and it moved up and it didn't even go back to the high. It didn't even really rally too much in percentage terms. I mean, this is the 2 times 2. That's a lot. But really, like, if you're aiming for 600% like it happened in the past, that wasn't enough, right? So you're still in it. It goes back down. You're still in it. Now it's trading back below your entry. And you're like, oh, shit, I fucked this up. But I don't want to sell now, because if now Altseason comes around, I just sold at a loss. It goes up. You feel validated. And it just dumps to pieces, right? And that's kind of the problem that I have with all these Altseason calls that pretty much everyone is kind of making, because what it is in the end, it's just closing the eyes and just praying for this big move to kind of rescue you, while you can kind of take your faith in your own hands, kind of trade this, see if it works out, and if it doesn't, you get out. The Altseason call, all it's doing is kind of just making it harder for you to act rationally, because if you have this grand price of an Altseason that kind of puts in a green candle like this onto the chart, then you're never going to trade this well, because there's no way you can. I mean, if I was expecting this kind of candle to happen at any given time, I couldn't trade this. There's no way. And that's kind of the problem that I have. Just like staying reasonable and not expecting the world, but just trading it for what it gives you. I mean, I traded Link, for example. I expected a big up move. I bought in here. It
Said
moved
Link
up,
again.
and then Link. Jesus Christ! Litecoin.
You know what? I really like
both
Michael's point, who says the amount of slips must mean Don is a secret marine. I'm kind of starting to agree. Every time you say bullish stuff, you say Link.
No, I mean, I don't even know why. Probably because I've been talking about Link so much. But yeah, Litecoin. We've had this. I bought this. It moved up, and I could have sat in that trade and been like, okay, Altseason, because Bitcoin's at all-time high, conditions fit, right? But once I saw this PA move poorly and didn't do what I wanted it to do, which is it broke out, it should move like massively and impulsively to the upside. I saw it didn't, and I got out. And now it's trading way below my entry. And I would have been in a situation where I would have to think about cutting this trade at the swing low, which that's not fun to do, right? And that's a problem. And I think that's kind of what my entire frustration with the Altseason calls kind of comes from, because I mean it just takes good trading, throws it out the window, and just makes you expect big candles while the market isn't really in the position to give it to you. I mean, that's basically it, I think.
Good points. Agreed. And I remember your Link thing. You were frustrated because you missed like a tiny bit of that move, and I bet you feel fine now. Okay, I mean, we covered a ton of content there, right? So I mean, if that was helpful, of course, let us know. If you want us to do more kind of educational stuff, also let us know. That'll be cool. But any feedback would be very grateful for. And of course, any questions you have from any of that would be... We'll give it a go.
Yep, sounds fair. Actually, I have a lot of people asking for different kind of altcoins.
Yeah, I've just brought DOT up.
Yeah, that one's mental.
Yeah, DOT number go up. DOT. So the USD pair, this is one of those, I think, that falls into the DeFi sector that's trending strongly, and until it stops working, just trade the stuff that works, right? I think that's reasonably applicable here. I think this is the chart we had in Technical Roundup, if I recall correctly, because we used my one, I think. I mean, it's just very much the case. You got your deep retest, bounces the bottom of the range, and then goes much higher. Whether you want to update the chart to reflect this more recent consolidation, so something like this, the highest close before the leg down, I might actually do that and just keep it there as a placeholder. That would be reasonable. But this is one of those risk-defined ones where whenever it tests structure, you seem to, as long as the trend is intact, get something positive going, right? So here, I mean, this is very quick. That's a low time frame retest. Bottom of the range here. So if that comes down, kind of you're probably a lot of these DeFi coins I've noticed, Duck, they really like their round numbers, especially because when you're in price discovery, I mean, what the fuck else are you going to use? So if this comes down to kind of $9, $10, that's probably the punt area for DOT. But again, following that same logic we discussed earlier, it's held these retests of support every single time it's come into it. If for any reason it fails to do that, I wouldn't be holding down to say, well, okay, I tried to buy 10, 10.5, it didn't work. I'll buy 9. Well, okay, it didn't work. There's support at 8, then there's support at 6. Well, there's a swing low at 4, and then it basically, not suggesting that's the trajectory for DOT, but that's kind of applying that mental model, the one which screws you the most, to how this altcoin would work, right? So for DOT USD, I think your pullback structures between 9 and 10, basically where the last breakout came from, that's really the first structure to punt if it manages to get down there. And if that fails, I'd probably get out of the way and look for something a bit more decent, which for me, there's a big level at 5 to 6. It's basically continuation until proven otherwise, something we write about a lot in the newsletter. For the record, Duck, something I've been thinking about a lot. If I just traded Technical Roundup for months, as it was, I'd be way better off right now than whatever the fuck I was doing. Because I think I looked back for whatever issue. It basically said bullish Bitcoin until proven otherwise since like the beginning of October or some stupid shit, and it was never proven otherwise. So maybe I should kind of take it a bit more seriously. But as for the Bitcoin pair on DOT, this actually starting to look pretty decent for me. I mean, I know this is kind of daily levels and they're not the most fantastic in the world, but I basically have this pre-breakdown range. So where did the final leg, if you will, or where did the downtrend really materialize? For me, it's here. And for technical levels to work with, I basically got the lowest close and highest close before that downtrend leg. And you had resistance at the range low, and then this most recent weekly candle closed kind of at or slightly above the top of the range and is now retesting it as support. I think if you want to be a bit more liberal with it, because again, people are less likely to trade the BTC pair in itself and just use it as a kind of guide. Holding, most bullish scenario, holding above here and just continuation higher. At that point, when the market does this kind of stair-steppy thing and then breaks probably the best level, there's not real... The resistance that's left as a result of these lower highs isn't that great. It'll probably just fucking explode from that point if this level holds. But generally for .BTC, holding within... or basically the reclaim of this range, again, bottom side, tested, then you've got break and the top side test right now. As long as that's intact... I think outperformance is still likely. If it loses that 32, 33 level, it probably looks like a piece of shit and I wouldn't want anything to do with it. So USD pair, up until proven otherwise, not quite at support yet, but probably round numbers or those obvious levels to look at. BTC pair, which is important for the reasons we stated, actually looks pretty decent, as long as an invalidation would be the lower boundary, failing to flip to support. This is one of the stronger ones, and I also quite like what I like about DOT. I know fuck all about the fundamentals, but I quite like the fact that our coin market cap, whatever, the top cryptos by market cap are getting a bit of a reshuffling. That to me is positive. I know a lot of these legacy dinosaur chains are cool and they're still present in fiat on-ramps, etc. But I don't know about you, Duck, but it's felt for me for a while there's been some kind of disconnect between the top list and then what people actually give a shit about and what's being traded. So it's nice that that's taking a bit of a different shape.
Yeah, it's true. I agree. With regards to Link, because there's a lot of people asking about Link. I mean, that's like one of the coins that I think where the disconnect between people that are looking at the USD pair and people that are actually looking at the BTC pair is the biggest. Just based on the fact that if you've been holding Link for the last few months, you've basically missed the entire Bitcoin run. I mean, it's basically down 68% right now against Bitcoin. I mean, all the way back to the low, it went like 80% down against Bitcoin, while ETH was just holding steady, right? I mean, it's obviously has moved up a lot in its history, but I mean, I think in general, these kind of trades that you have to take, that you have to kind of look at this in a cycle kind of fashion, right? All these altcoins have a cycle, and Link just kind of went through its first. So Link actually had like this massive run up, while all the other altcoins were suffering. This was kind of where this Link mythos kind of started, where everyone was like, Link only goes up. And then you had this acceleration in here where the other altcoins were doing pretty well too. So, I mean, you had Link just kind of spearhead it all. It went up, and then everyone kind of stormed into the Link trade, right? Because, I mean, Link's the new fresh thing. Everyone likes Link. And then you have like everyone buy. I mean, you even had Portnoy come in and buy Link, and then it just dumped, right? And in my opinion, that kind of stuff happens because once everyone that is gonna buy it has bought, I mean, where do you go, right? If the market doesn't really expand. And so far, I mean, we've had a lot of retail coming into Bitcoin. We haven't really seen too much retail just kind of swap into the altcoins just yet, in my opinion. But yeah, so this has been cycling pretty well, but it's pretty clear to me, like we've broken the most important support on the chart, so that's kind of trading bearishly. So anything that is in the opposite direction of that trend is just a bounce to me until proven otherwise, right? So I mean, Link BTC, it's not looking too pretty. I mean, if you're looking at Link USD, you just broke all-time high, right? So that's where the disconnect comes from, because like if you're sitting in Link USD, you're a very happy person because you're like, okay, this broke all-time high. I mean, I made a bunch of money. And then you look at the Link BTC pair, and you've lost like 70% of your Bitcoin holdings in the last few months, and that's a very, very different story.
It's a month of underperforming the market, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and months was underperforming like basically anything. Like even ETH, Litecoin, everything kind of did a lot better than Link
What
did.
does Link ETH look like? Sorry to interrupt, I'm just interested.
Yeah, I can show it to you. It's also downtrend. Is this Link BTC? Let's do it like this. ETH BTC. Yeah. So it's a downtrend. It's bouncing pretty nicely. But I mean, you would like everyone can kind of see that this is downtrend, right? Where does the downtrend kind of change? I think this would be a really, really good change of pace if it actually started breaking resistances. So far, I mean, with trading above it, we still have 2 days to go. So if altcoins do kind of well into the weekend, I think there could easily be, and I've talked about this for the last few weeks, there could easily be a nice move into this resistance here, right? Like I wouldn't be surprised by that if we kind of reclaim this resistance, because just the most obvious resistance, there's really nothing in here. So there could be a really nice move there. And then like the 40% move on Link BTC would make everyone euphoric on the Bitcoin or on the USD pair, right? Because $20 Link suddenly goes and trades at 25 and even higher. It's a pretty good win, right? But in general, it's still a bearish trend. So I could see that playing out. I could even see ranging in here. If we don't reclaim this level, I think it's just going to keep dumping. I would be surprised if it just suddenly, like if we close below this level and it just went up regardless. But yeah, I'll be watching it. So far, it's a bearish trend. I want to see that change. I want to see it close above this resistance, and if it does, we trade into this one. And if it does reclaim this one, I mean, then we can go back to the parabolic link that we know and love, which, I mean, I'd be more than happy to see, because like if we actually reclaim this, where does it go? Like there's no resistance left. I mean, you could argue that there's some resistance in here left where people are going to look to sell, but I wouldn't want to, because this is kind of what I've been warning about for Bitcoin, right? You have this parabola, you have the parabolic break, and then you just start dumping really, really hard. And if that happens, and I mean, it's the same, still true for Bitcoin, right? If that happens, you get a massive move to the downside. But if that move is reclaimed entirely, then you're just going to squeeze, like, I mean, that's just going to be mad if we actually start going back above this resistance. I think we go easily above all-time high.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where the easier bullish trade is, right? Like if you're asking yourself, I want to be bullish Link, or I want to get long Link at the expense of like some people say you're long altcoins, you're short Bitcoin. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that's like an exaggerated version. But you're certainly like reduced exposure to Bitcoin for the most part for most people, right? So the question is, where do I want to take the bullish trade for Link? Is it on the first bounce after literally months of underperformance, where it's not really risk defined either, it kind of turned in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the range? Or do I want to wait for the reclaim, pay up for an entry, but then have the benefit of trading like price discovery essentially in the BTC and the USD pair? And I think that would set up quite mentally, right? So it's the question of like, where do I want to take the bullish trade? Not, there are some places that are just better than others, and people are mentioning Aave as being like a massive outperformer of the market, right? Which is cool, but also look at Aave against Bitcoin, right? This thing's been insane since like forever. Hasn't lost a single support, and everything has just been intact. So it almost reinforces the point that even those USD outperformers that people want to trade and that look fantastic, etc., that doesn't somehow invalidate the Bitcoin analysis. If anything, they kind of complement each other, and so it remains a relevant consideration nonetheless. And the only reason I address that is because you see a lot of arguments on Twitter now that alt BTC pairs are low volume, therefore irrelevant, and the only thing you should kind of look at are the alt USD pairs. That's the ones you trade. I think that's misguided, unless you are like literally like a linear futures maximalist and you don't actually hold any Bitcoin and you just trade with stable coins, and alt USD is just another pair for you. I mean, even in those extreme cases, which I think are far and few between, you still want to look at Bitcoin because it's an accurate predictor of how well the USD pair is going to behave. I'm really struggling to come up with a scenario where you just completely ignore the alt BTC pair and kind of sever the link between the two. I just don't think it's a very good idea. But we know why people do it, as you mentioned, because it's kind of almost like a coping mechanism for underperforming the market, but they still want to feel good because the coin went up, right?
Yeah. And I mean, if you're taking leverage trades, I mean, I don't really fault you for saying, okay, Link is mooning, and I look at the Link chart and it's down 80% against Bitcoin, right? Like, this is always what happens when I'm anywhere really. Like, I'm in a Discord chilling, and then I see like this happen on Bitcoin, on the Bitcoin pair on Link, and then I see comments about Link mooning, right? And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? This is like completely collapsing, right? In this instance, and I look at the Bitcoin at the USD pair, and it just bounced like a little bit, right? There's like there's a weird disconnect between like not only the Bitcoin pair and the USD pair, but also between time frames, right? Sometimes you see someone say, okay, Link just moved mega, and then you look at Link and it's up $1, and you usually don't trade those kind of low time frames, so for you it didn't really move at all. So I mean, that's something that I personally need to work on as well, because I'm always shaking my head. But if you're trading these very, very low time frame moves, that is a significant move to you, right? And I think it's fine to kind of, if you're looking for these trades and you're getting these trades, I mean, there's a good amount of money to be made there. So, I mean, all power to you. It's just, if you're kind of trying to look for the swing plays on a longer time frame, or make an investment, I think it's much, much better if you're kind of looking at the whole picture, not just at one of the two. So
sounds good to me. I think we beat the topic to death, in a positive way. Now we have something we can maybe link to people, no pun intended, to kind of make our position a bit clearer. We've also written about it a lot in Technical Roundup on kind of ad nauseam at this point, but people are still going to get trapped, and that's still going to be a thing. I'll even go out on a limb and say it's likely that a non-trivial amount of these DeFi pairs that are really popular now, not that, I'm not going to name names because I literally don't know any better, but new ones will come and it'll apply to older ones, etc. A lot of those seemingly infallible DeFi pairs, new and old, will probably go through a market cycle and will look like shit at some point. And so it's important to keep that perspective in mind, even in a positively trending market, that once these altcoins go through one market cycle, the probability of a second one is incredibly, well, not incredibly rare, but it's just almost not worth betting on, right? Certainly if history is any precedent in that regard. AYS says, can you chart sushi? We write about sushi almost every week. I think I've got the chart that we're using more or less on the USD pair. Bounced off support. It's basically building support higher, right? It's kind of that behavior we talked about where the breakout levels, the breakout levels more or less end up flipping into support when they're retested. I'll say it's getting a bit more aggressive recently, right? It's not really forming those ranges for as long, and it's retesting and finding support at structures which aren't as clear, but whatever, uptrend until proven otherwise. Could even add, and I think I will actually, this breakout level more recently at 466, but this is one of those strongly trending ones that's up until proven otherwise. Since it first appeared on Technical Roundup, that's up like 150%. Somehow I still haven't longed this thing, but when I do, it'll be the top, so I'm kind of scared anyway. And again, look at the BTC pair, unsurprisingly performing really strongly as well. And this is the type of stuff, I don't know how much you agree, Duck, this is the stuff you want to see from the BTC pair if you're interested in the USD pair or want additional confluence, or even amongst, let's say, like you're bullish a bunch of the alt USD pairs, but you don't want to go all in because it's so closely correlated, and you want to decide which one to allocate more or most exposure to. One way to answer that question is to look at the alt BTC pairs for that same basket, and the one which is at support or looks technically strong is the better bet, rather than putting your money on a bunch of horses, because then, I mean, your risk isn't equally distributed, whatever. But that's another potential use case. And again, it comes as no surprise that the current BTC pair looks pretty decent breaking through this range here. But I think, if anything, this kind of reinforces the point. When you look at the strong USD performance, you can almost always make a case for being long the BTC pair as well.
Couldn't agree more.
There you go. Final question I think we'll answer from Niels. I think you're a good one because we've discussed this, Duck. Really curious in your opinions. Would you buy the top 10 coins or focus on DeFi or lower cap coins instead once Altseason starts, and why?
I mean, it's going to cycle around, right? It's just kind of how it is. you're gonna have like different sectors pumping. Sometimes, like it's gonna be narrative based. Like if we get an old season, it's always how it is. Like you have money's like move into one sector, and the old coins are pretty much a sector altogether.
Yeah.
Like you have them on Coinbase, you have them everywhere. Every on ramp has them.
That's
right?
your kind of top 10
So
he's referring to, yeah.
yeah, so you kind of get money like into that. They might not pump as much as the other ones, but they probably aren't going to zero anytime soon. So the risk is less, the reward is less, right? And then the further down you go the list, the higher the risk becomes, but the higher the reward also gets, right? Because you're kind of like, there's always this limit of Bitcoin at the top. You're not going to overtake Bitcoin. Anyone that tells me anything is going to overtake Bitcoin, I'm just shaking my head. Maybe it happens one day.
Jail.
Maybe I'm proven wrong. I just don't think it's going to happen. So that's kind of the roof, right? And when you think about it, the lower down you go the list, the more potential they have to go up. Just based on the fact that like all these cryptos, like if they have a good enough narrative going, they can just pump. It doesn't really matter how good or bad they are.
Well, how true the narrative is.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's kind of like this thing where you get the stone rolling, and if you get it rolling in a good enough way, it just goes, right?
Yeah.
And that's gonna, like, if you have this kind of old seasony thing, that's gonna happen for some coins, not for everyone. Like Nano, for example, was one of the ones, the Mega Moon back in 17, 18. You had Neo, one of the ones that did really well. And then some other ones underperform, right? Zcash, for example. But in general, like you have these different sectors, like the old coins, the new coins, DeFi coins, privacy sector, all this kind of stuff where money moves in and out of. So what you do in general in like an old season is you allocate, like you see one coin off like a basket do really well. And then, I mean, one, you could just chase it, and that usually works when the market is doing really well. Or two, you just allocate to different coins that do the same thing, basically. And we have multiple of those
Almost
anyway.
like an arbitrage.
Right? Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that you can do. Easiest way is just to kind of look at the other ones, go into those, and then once you've actually had the pump that you expected, you just move into the next one. So I don't think, like, if we truly get an old season, like a massive outperformance of all coins, I don't think anything is going to be left out the mix.
Yeah, that was my answer was going to be, right? I was going to say, look, if it's a real alt season, it doesn't matter. It almost doesn't matter whether you're buying the top 10 or DeFi or lower cap, etc. Because it's almost harder to get the timing wrong than it is to get it right. That's how crazy things get. The
big problem that a lot of people have is just kind of jumping the gun a little bit too much, like they're chasing too much. There's something that I've seen in 17 a lot, and in 18, where it's like something pumps, and they're sitting in something that isn't pumping, and then they chase it, and then they're sitting there and just watching their coin pump now that they've sold, and then they jump back, and like all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of pitfalls to fall into. The best thing that you can do is just take it easy, take it slow. If that should happen, I mean, I'm hoping we're getting another old season. I mean, retail participation is going up, so I mean, that's like the most important ingredient for it. Bitcoin's at all-time high, so I mean, that kind of gets a lot of money into the space as well. I would argue this time, the one problem that we do have is this time, like the average kind of crypto person is pretty poor still, considering Bitcoin price, while the institutions and everything, the people that have bought big are not retail focused. So those are like mainly just Bitcoin focused. So they're not looking at altcoins too much. But I hope that's just me, like being too worried about stuff.
They'll get greedy. It's fine. They're still humans after all, right?
Yeah, just hoping that happens. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can talk about with these altcoin moves. You can also talk about the leverage and how that changes things. I think that goes way beyond the time that we have today.
That's right. Yeah, we've also discussed it on a couple of previous occasions as well. But yeah, that seems to be it. If you've learnt at least one useful thing, I mean, I hope so, because otherwise, gosh, the signal to noise ratio isn't great. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, do all that good stuff. A thank you, of course, to Bybit for supporting the live stream as well as the newsletter. Those are all free. They will stay free, of course, so make sure to sign up. TechnicalRoundup.com for the newsletter, and of course, right here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7 UTC for the live streams. Next one, of course, will be Monday with me. And that's it. Duck, any final notes, comments? Of course, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for joining me.
Nice to catch up, isn't it?
But no, thanks for coming by. Always appreciate it. And yeah, see you guys next time.
See you guys next time.